What has God called you to in life? In your relationships? In your career path? Educationally? In your ministry category? Of course, your work is your ministry as well, but I mean your ministry within the church, where you go to church, the community in which you live. What has He called you to? What is His will? And where He guides you, the nagging question that you come back to over and over again in your life is, will you provide, God? There's a great story that comes to us from the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 22. And it's a story about this old man named Abraham and his now likely adolescent or maybe early 20-year-old son Isaac, whom God had provided miraculously in Abraham's life, and through whom God had promised that He would bless Abraham and touch the world through Abraham. But God calls Abraham to sacrifice this son, Isaac, on Mount Moriah, which ironically is where the Dome of the Rock today exists, that was built by the Muslims in 691 AD. But that is the rock under that Dome of the Rock. That is the rock on which Abraham is called by God and tested by God to sacrifice Isaac. And as the story unfolds, God stops him at the very last moment and says, "Don't sacrifice Isaac. I wanted to see if you were willing to lay down that which was most precious to you for me, for the will of God, for the kingdom of heaven." And God miraculously provides a ram that gets sacrificed instead of Isaac. So in your life, that question, what is the will of God for your life and your career, your relationships, your ministry, and so forth? Are you willing to lay down everything that stands in the way? A question that we'll come back to over and over again in our lives, and God will test us over the course of our lives in different ways with regard to it. What has God called me to? He's called me and you to way more than we could possibly imagine or even conceive. But the danger is that you and I forget that He is the one who provides. Like in the New Testament it says, you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. When we start to do things on our own, when we start to put conditions on our walk with God, I'll follow you, God, if... And then God brings us over and over again to those testing places where He calls us and challenges us to give up everything in order to be obedient and follow His will to the nth degree, to the most profound places that He calls us to in life. Relationally, vocationally, educationally, monetarily, it never stops. Life is an adventure, all wrapped up in the will of God. The question you must resolve is, where God guides you, will He provide for you? He will test you. He will build your prayer life wrapped around that question. That is Jehovah Jireh, the Lord, our provider. God will provide everything you need in order to accomplish His purposes and His plans for Him on the earth. Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done through your life, through your heart, through your answered prayers, through your sharing your story with those around you. God